Hey y'all, there's no sound.
It's fine. Let's pretend I didn't say that, yo.
Wow. I think you're good, man.
Okay, we good to go? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Fantastic. Okay, I think I said good evening, committee members, so I'll say it again. Good evening, committee members. We're starting this meeting at, just for the record, 6:38 p.m. And we'll lay out a few ground rules so we can have a fruitful discussion tonight. First, no one may speak until granted the floor. CB11 members, if you have a question about board business or wish to make a motion, please raise your hand and wait to be recognized. To raise your hand through Zoom, click the participants icon and you will find the raise hand function there. Members should not engage in a back and forth discussion. The chair or co-chairs will recognize the next person to speak. Please keep your questions and comments brief and on topic to the discussion. Members of the public, if you have a question or comment about the subjects on the agenda, please raise your hand and wait to be recognized. Okay, so Angel, can you do the call to order?
The roll call.
Oh, sorry.
Members, when I call your name, please answer present. Jose Altamirano. Present. Adem Brija. Present. Kenneth Crouch. Present. Jewel Jones. Present. Sage Mason. Present. Jessica Morris. Valerie Ponte. Present. Asher Rodriguez.
Present.
Thank you, Angel. So,
There's no minutes.
okay. We don't currently have minutes. That is my responsibility, and I'll ensure that we have them by close of business this week for the prior meeting minutes. I guess we can move to the adoption of the agenda. Are there any objections to the adoption of the agenda? Okay. Seeing none, so we'll adopt the agenda as distributed to the members for today's meeting. Are there any announcements or informational updates? Okay, so then we'll move to our business for tonight. And Adem, I'll let you take it away for item A, and then we can get into it.
Thanks, Kenneth. All right, so we're gonna have discussion regarding committee assignments. I think to move on to the work we need to do, I'm just gonna tell everybody what your committee assignment was, and then we can correspond, me and Kenneth, with each of you to lay out or hear what you're thinking you want to do and kind of formulate a game plan for that moving forward. If you selected and responded, we gave you your choice. Otherwise, we distributed them how we saw fit. So Sage has oversight, Jewel has attendance, Jessica, City Charter Revision Commission and its potential impact on our bylaws, Jose and Asher, elections process. That's what we're going to be handling tonight. If there's anything left, they can work on that. If there's not much, we'll figure out somewhere else to assign them to. Valerie is officer and committee chair responsibilities. And me and Kenneth are going to do parliamentary procedures for conducting meetings, as well as any other topics not covered. However, you're all welcome to look at the document as a whole. And if you see anything that doesn't fall on a topic and you'd like it discussed or have any opinions on that, you're welcome to as well. But that's just so we could kind of chop this up, all right?
Can you share the assignments in writing somewhere?
Sure, we'll email them out, yeah. I just wanted you to hear them here first. Sage?
How does the parliamentary procedure section work?
What do you mean, between the two of us?
Yeah, like what does that look like?
Well, I think for one thing, we want to kind of have a return to Robert's Rules of Order, since that's what governs most of our procedures, but with some modifications that just make it a bit easier and more accessible for community board members. I think obviously, we would like to run things. We're very open to comments and additions, and I think we just want to lay out or maybe even remind folks of some of those rules of procedure, of decorum, things like that. In our meetings.
I think also, if anybody noticed in the last, it might have been executive and full board, the way motions were being taken by our chair just changed from the month before to this month. And I think that we should clearly have that, so that when we do it, there isn't like, well, why did it happen this month and not happen that way that month? So whatever it is, and we agree, it's gonna be that way moving forward, and if somebody falls off of that, they can easily be brought back in and be like, well, you weren't doing that right, so, all right? All right, that's my portion.
Amazing. Thank you, Adam. Okay, so folks, we want to be really targeted today. So we recognize there are a lot of changes that need to be, there are a lot of modifications that can be done to the bylaws, but I think this is probably the most pressing and the most important, and that would be our election procedure. And so I think we want to have a really fruitful discussion tonight. And so the way that we'll have this happen is I'll describe the proposals that have been put forth so far that are also still workable at this point in time. So I'm referencing specifically, I think, moving the election. I think logistically, there's likely no longer time for that to actually go forth, but there were, I think, 3 proposals in total. We'll take each one in turn. So I'll throw out the proposal. This won't be the formal language that we'll actually use in the bylaws revision. I think that's something that we can either work on offline or in a subsequent meeting, but this will be, that idea in its sum and substance, if that makes sense. I'll throw out the idea. Each member will get 90 seconds to offer their thoughts, their opinions, their perspective on that amendment. We'll try to make sure everyone who wants to speak gets a turn. Then we'll move on to the next amendment, do the same thing. Once we've gone through all the amendments, we'll give the members an opportunity to vote on those 3 potential amendments. Are there any questions about that process thus far before we begin?
Can you
Yes.
state what the potential amendments are?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, please don't hold me to it. This is not the actual language we'll use in the document, but I think we'll hopefully accurately capture what those ideas are. So the first proposal that we've had in our discussions in our meeting was having an amendment where members who are ineligible to complete or serve out a full term are then not allowed to run for that term. So what that looks like is if someone is, I think, does that make sense to everybody? Yeah, okay. The second proposal was the creation of a truncated or shortened election term to conform with term limits. So we can work out the details, whether it would be a 10-month or a 14-month term, but a term that conforms with that aligns us with the the term out process. So in other words, if there's someone who will be termed out just by chance because we use off cycles when we appoint people to our board, there'd be a truncated term, and that would align our elections, at least as of now, with the term out period.
Point of clarification?
Sure.
In the first proposal, you're using the idea serve full term as the full term of elected office. In the second proposal, you're using the word term to reference the board member's appointment term.
That's correct.
So 2 different.
Yes, 2 different uses of the word term. Yes, and so
Thank you for the clarification.
of course. And then finally, I believe the third proposal that was discussed was a 2-term term limit. So I think is that the third use of the word term? I'm not sure, but it is, right? Okay. Yeah, Dan, if you want to add something to that.
I think we just might want to add a 4th, because we talked about last time, whether we want to keep the assistant treasurer and assistant secretary positions. I know that there was different opinions, but I feel like it's something we should also discuss.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Oh, and then, sorry, one more. There was the idea thrown about having to serve a full 2-year term on the board before being able to run for an officer position. That was another idea that was thrown out. That might be worth a discussion.
Yes, thank you, Dan. I'm just writing this down. So I'm writing this down for reference. Yeah.
So I think we have 5 if we consider those 2 as well.
Right.
Go ahead,
Sage.
Does the like truncated amendment include changing terms just to being 1 year instead of 2?
And correct me if I'm wrong, the truncated proposal, when it came out, I believe, was asking for it to be a one-time thing.
So I think what I mentioned is another separate amendment.
Oh, to like do
Just 1 year.
1-year terms.
Okay, 1-year terms. So that'll be 6. So.
Yeah.
I'll just read them back really quickly so that we have them front of mind. First, if you're ineligible to run for a full term or to serve out a full term, excuse me, then you let me just rephrase that totally. If you are not able to serve out your full term, then you're ineligible to run. 2, there's a proposal for a term limit that lasted 2 community board terms. 3, there's a proposal for a truncated or shortened election term to conform with the charter amendments. 4, the removal of the assistant secretary or assistant treasurer positions. 5, I can't read my own handwriting. Requirement of serving on the board for 1 term before running. And then finally 6, 1-year officer terms. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll start the timer. If anyone would like to begin, then we can just go around consecutively. And again, you don't feel like you have to be compelled. You don't have to provide thoughts, but we want to give everyone a fair opportunity to give thoughts and just make sure it's orderly. Everyone has the same amount of time to contribute. So Sage, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
I have 2 things. The first is a proposal that maybe we do like the easy ones first, like the assistant secretary treasurer position. I feel like that's something there's pretty there's consensus around.
Yeah.
And 2 is that I think some people, if they are planning on running in the upcoming elections, they should disclose that.
Thank you for that, Sage. I appreciate both points. Yeah, I think I can't say as a matter of COI, conflict of interest law, that there is a problem, but I do think that's up to individual members how to disclose those things. But I think it's definitely a valid point that's taken and and acknowledged. Yeah. Okay, so that being said, I'll take your suggestion. We'll start with the removal of the assistant secretary or assistant treasurer position. Anyone want to start? And again, we don't take the full 90 seconds. We can go pretty quickly if there's no dissent or objection here.
So question.
Yes, please.
Comment. So originally I had sort of maintained the position that more pipelines to leadership was a good thing to have on the board, especially when there's a churn of
Honestly, I'm just have a little time.
That's okay. And
Sorry.
90 seconds, right? Of membership. But I think the understanding that the calling for an election, calling for a special election, and the amount of effort and sort of action that would take is huge. That it hasn't happened to fill these vacancies, and it hasn't disrupted the general operations of the board. I think shifting positions on that to keep things lean and operate in an efficient way. If there was a need to call for election, then it would have to happen. And in the meantime, it seems like there's an agreement that the duties could be maintained by other officers. So I have no qualms about shifting my position.
Thank you for that, Jessica. And under time too. But yeah, thank you for that. Okay, so I'll move this way. So Sage, again, you don't have to feel like you have to say anything, but to the extent that you'd like to.
Yeah, I was sort of in a similar boat with regard to the those positions being like 1, pipelines to leadership, and 2, providing some sort of continuity in the event of somebody's absence. But I also agree that there hasn't been a major disruption not having an assistant secretary or assistant treasurer. I think it would be good to have a treasurer. And I'm reminded of what Derek said last time, that people rise and fall to the expectations we set for them. So while I don't think the assistant treasurer and secretary positions are necessarily necessary with regard to how those positions have been used in the past, I don't think that's to say that, we could just change what we expect those positions to cover, and maybe that will become a useful position later on. But I think to start, it would be good to have that for the treasurer position rather than these like assistant positions. So I think it'll be, I don't think we need this position.
Okay, thank you, Sage.
And I think there are other ways to create pipelines to leadership, like elected committee chairs.
Got it. Okay, thank you, Sage. I appreciate that. Okay. Okay.
Well, I'll just say that I'm in favor of maintaining those two, because in the absence of the treasurer or the secretary, and we can say duties taken up by other officers or other individuals, who are these other individuals, and how's that codified in terms of expectation of these others in the absence of the secretary and treasurer? And as one who's been on the board in the past, I think it's necessary to maintain.
That's well taken. Okay, thank you.
I think I'm in favor of removing these positions. I think we've discussed it in terms of something we need to.
Jose, can you speak up a bit so they can hear you?
I said we discussed it last month, so I don't think these positions are really serving a purpose. I think maybe in the future when things are more balanced. We haven't had a treasurer for a few months and no one really noticed it. Just gives you a point to take. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. I will be very, very brief. I think I'm also in favor of removing it. Yeah, and I just wish the role was better defined, but I think in the absence of that is, I think, a lot of work that other officers can do to fill that role. So that's all I'll say on that.
Yeah, I think we talked about this at length. I'll just throw one other thing in. Our staff has also said that they don't feel that there's a need for these positions, and that work's fallen on them and they're already doing it. So I'm for not having either of those positions anymore.
Jessica?
Point of clarification about our general process as we start to take actions. Joel, to your point, I think if we decide to take an action, but there are additional considerations or contingency factors that, come up with that action, do we need to sort of propose resolutions for those what ifs, or potential solutions, or do we do that detail work later?
Right, so I'm mindful of the fact, and that's a really great point. I think we don't want to spend too much of the committee's time working out the language because there's just so many considerations to your point. But we do want to at least assume a position that we can then share amongst the committee members, because we do need to, as of now, still follow the 50-day procedure and then eventually the 30-day procedure. So I think in the interest of time, unless it's something very binary, I think if we can adopt a resolution that has broad agreement, and then within the committee, hopefully, use of Google Docs, things like that. And if really need be, then maybe a meeting later this month, but make sure that we are in agreement about what that language looks like, just so that we can focus on like the broader points of issue, if that makes sense.
So who will assume those duties if there's a need? That type of technicality will be something that will come up and be resolved in the language work that we will do later.
Right. So I think the co-chairs will start with a broad, whatever broad resolution we adopt here, we will put that to paper. I think we will give the committee members a brief amount of time to then opine on what that is, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Great.
Thank you, Jessica.
Derek.
I think, yeah, go ahead, Derek.
A question about the process. So does this committee intend on providing a full revision of the bylaws after you do the work and it's voted on as like a brand new revision? Or do you intend on taking individual items as amendments? Do you guys have an idea of what you think what you'll do? Because I have a follow-up question based off of which one you're thinking.
I mean, I think it's a good question. It depends on the nature of the change, right? But I'd love to hear your follow-up
Yeah,
question
so-
and or your.
So the follow-up is, so like, a typical process, if you're kind of presenting like a full revision of bylaws, is that a member may ask for it to be voted on in sections, right, piece by piece, right? So that any possible changes could be proposed and possibly voted on at that time. That 50-day notice is like that we're going to do a change, not that like the final change is the final change. So I'll give you an example. At the next full board, someone could say, I know you told us you were thinking of doing 28 days. I want to make it 27 days. That could be debated, voted, yes, we'll go with that amendment, and then that amendment will be followed. It wouldn't have to then go through another waiting period because you let people know this thing and changing the number of days is germane to the proposed change. I couldn't come in and say, oh, can we also throw on, we're going to get rid of this position. That would require another days of notice. So I bring that up because if you bring this to the full board to get rid of these positions and there's a majority that says we don't want to get rid of them, I think it's important that when you're crafting the bylaws that it could stand something getting just straight up removed, right? Because like that could happen. You could say, oh, sentence 30 on this page, we don't want to do that anymore and we want to just cross it out. And then everything else kind of has to stand on its own, because I do think that, who knows, it may be unanimous about removing these positions, but I want to put that out there as something to consider, like a process thing. So again, whether you're going to go with just that one amendment and it's voted up or down, but if you're going to bring it as part of like a package of like all of the stuff at once, like a full revision, that's just something to know, would be a part of that process. I don't know if I'm.
No, that's
any
very.
questions, please?
No, it makes sense. I think we have to, I don't know if we could put everything together in one shot, if that's what's being said. I mean, because the election stuff is, otherwise, why are we approaching this in a time-sensitive matter? Like, I feel like this is gonna be an ongoing process. I even though I'm co-chairing it, I'm not 100% sure that there needs to be this complete overhaul to what we're doing. That's just my opinion, as much as have what's written there being practiced correctly, whatever. The election stuff, I think we're gonna try to get as much of it as tonight. I do hear what both of you are saying, which I think is the impacts that one change could have on other things and being careful about that.
So your process would be you'd vote on all of the pieces.
Yeah.
Things could change, and at the very end, you'd say, okay, now we're adopting the full final revision.
That's, yeah. No, I hear what you're saying. Yeah.
Definitely well taken, yeah.
And if possible, I want to speak on to the question too about the.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
So I think that one thing is that those are positions voted on by the full board, and they provide two voices, two votes on the executive committee, right? So right now, the majority of the executive committee is composed of committee chairs who are appointed by, currently are appointed by the chair of the board. So it provides a little bit more balance between like the common members, right, and voting for representation versus who gets appointed by the chair. Another part to consider, I hear the point, it's very well taken about the special election. We should have had one already, and we have not. One option to consider is like revising what happens when there's a vacancy, right? If for some vacancies, someone could be appointed to carry out the rest of the term, or there could be like until maybe like a second person needs to be filled, and then there's a special election to sort of cut down on that number of special elections. So just another thing to consider. You don't necessarily have to like get rid of the positions because we feel like they're not getting filled because special elections are so hard. We could say there's only a special election for this position, the chair, and all the other ones could be filled through executive or some other process. So that's something to consider. And then I agree with like there's value in the positions if we make them have value. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you for that, Derek. Okay, I don't want to get too far off, although I think those are all both great points. I do think, given that we've all had a chance to discuss, I think I think at this point, we can entertain a motion with respect to that item. And again, if the majority of folks here feel that maybe we want to find another solution, whether that be, some kind of automatic appointment process or something else, then I think, we'll see how the vote falls. But yes.
So just to say, wherever we land, this will also go to full board for
Right.
consideration. So
Right.
if we're on the fence, it's likely that there will be some on the fenceness to the larger body, and I think that's valid as a process to honor and proceed through. So, it's not definitive and we don't have to feel defeated because we land in a, point of non-consensus, so.
Sure, definitely, absolutely. Sage.
I move to remove these, or how does one phrase this?
And you
I
can say it
move
like
to
that.
recommend to the full board that we remove these two positions.
Right, nothing is binding, but yeah, okay. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, then.
But I also want to say, I think it's funny that like the reason we got here is because we failed to adhere to the bylaws in holding elections to fill these two positions.
That is ironic. Okay, so do we have a vote? We do a voice vote?
Sure. Oh, whatever you want.
We'll do a roll call. Yeah.
What do you think of that?
Yeah, because these are all gonna maybe be closer than we think, but we don't know that yet, so.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed?
Aye.
Just to say no or nay.
Yeah, you know what, roll call it, Angel, if you
Yes.
don't mind. Roll call.
Jose Altamirano,
Aye.
Adem Briha,
Yes.
Kenneth Crouch,
Aye.
Jill Jones,
Nope.
Sage Mason,
Aye.
Jessica Morris,
Nay.
Valerie Ponte,
Aye.
Asher Rodriguez. Vote carries.
Thank you, Angel. Okay,
What did Asher say?
well,
No response.
unfortunately, the business has to continue, so, just a brief pause. Is there any other item that we feel is, and again, great point, Jessica, we don't have to necessarily come down on one foot about anything tonight, but is there any other item that we think can be resolved tonight before we move to, the election procedure? Sage?
I feel like we, maybe I'm like reading the room wrongly, but I feel like we could get rid of the truncated option. I don't think, it doesn't make sense to me to have like a one-off thing.
I will say, we could at least entertain debate about it, right? I'm not sure how the rest of the members feel, but,
I always welcome
but I
to.
definitely hear what you're saying.
I feel like that will be in my head quicker to resolve than some of the other things.
Definitely. But yes, there,
I think just to clarify.
Yeah.
I think the purpose of a truncated term is so you can move the date of the election. Right, so right now elections occur in December, November. So if you did a longer term or a shorter term, you'd be pushing the election out of November. That's the purpose of truncating it, if I
That's,
understand correctly.
as far as I know, as it was proposed, that was not why it was proposed. I believe it was proposed, Angel, go ahead.
No, I wasn't gonna speak to that, you finished.
It maybe was in part, I think there was the other proposal about truncating it so that certain members who would be termed out, because we have a 2-year term, that would be termed out in spring of 2026, that would, 2027, that would assume that position in January of 2026. Should they were to win, they wouldn't be able to serve out the full term. And thus there's a call for a truncated term to allow certain people to be able to run that wouldn't be able to run.
But that's if you're adopting
The truncated term.
the saying if you can't finish a term.
Yeah, they kind of go hand in hand. Yeah, those two things. Yeah, I could see there being a discussion about both of those simultaneously because they do touch on each other.
Question. I'm a visual thinker and sometimes a picture helps. And I think in this frame of why we would be moving things in time, a picture of it may be a helpful tool to describe what it is we're proposing to do to the board. And I would be happy to draw a picture of what we're saying with these sort of deadlines and terms kind of outlined in a way that may help everybody kind of grasp it once we get to whether we have action or not, if it's useful in describing happy to do.
If you're so inclined, that'd be so helpful. We really appreciate that. And then I want to move to Angel.
I was just gonna suggest that before getting too deep into this particular conversation, it may be helpful to lay out what the full problem is that you're looking to resolve by these proposals. The problem of board member term limits commencing with this appointment term and the potential impact on anyone so limited to serve out the entirety of their term as of spring 2027. And then measure whatever the proposals are in and around that, because absent the term limits, it's unlikely we would have been having this conversation at all. But it's because of the board member term limits that ideas have arisen to try to address that potential, not that potential issue, that issue. It will always be an issue because of the imbalance between a board member's term and a community board 11 officer term. They're just starting at different times. So you're either gonna have a 1.5-year term or potentially mathematically a half-a-year term. But just suggesting that before you all enter into it, better have an understanding of the full scope.
Okay, thank you for that, Angel. Jessica.
Question, Angel, to your point, what number of sitting board members are expected to term out? Just so we have an order of magnitude understanding of the potential challenge.
I'm really smart, but not that smart.
Ah.
But I will get you the answer.
I believe it's 8. I'm also horrible at math, but that was my last count. I don't want us to get too, because it sounds like we may move to having a debate and discussion about it. So if there are any other points of clarification that are not debate, not that anyone was debating, so, but yeah. Yes.
It's a question for, not for anyone.
Yeah, I didn't mean to characterize, you guys are not doing that, but I just want to make sure we're on
Like,
point.
why, like, should we align the appointment time with the election time? Like, what would it mean to have those things starting at the same time? Right, that's my question, right? Because that's otherwise, like what Angel's saying, like, it will always be a problem otherwise.
I think it's a good question, yeah. I'm sorry, not to apply that. Jose?
In office oversight, was it last month? It was last month. We hadn't met in 5 years, but I figure I remember. But so, yeah, the first time we meet in 5 years, this was the biggest term, right? Because this is what's happening now. And every community board is having to deal with this. And we were presented with the first solution, with 2 solutions basically. One is this truncated term, which I really say doesn't make much sense. And I pointed out that night because it only solves it once, and going forward, it's still a constant issue. You know, it's community boards are modeled after city council. There's a reason for that. They have their election in November, they have 2-year terms. And I understand that new members come in around springtime, but then you're also pushing a lot of new members to like go straight into a vote, which technically, we've been here for a very long time, I still remember that. There's a reason why in public safety law, when I became chair, we started doing this whole, and a lot of other committees adopted it, where you present 1 month and you vote the next. It just gives people time and the full board to like, you know, really get the information, it gives them time to research. And this is a similar situation where coming out of office oversight, the truncated terms really didn't make logic to me. I'm like, I don't understand why we would even do this for a one-off, because it still doesn't solve our problem moving forward. Moving forward, every time someone is either 6 months out or 1.5 years out, we would have to have a special election. And I think the purpose of the bylaws is to kind of fix problems moving forward. You know, which is why then out of office oversight, we presented that solution. I brought it to bylaws last month, which is, which Angel brought up to us, which is basically if you cannot complete the 2 terms, then you can't run. You know, and that fixes the problem in perpetuity. You never have to touch it again. I just wanted to give a little background information on that particular point. And I kind of solved that other question you had as to the why and the who, but we are modeled after city council. City council does that in November.
Thank you, Jose. Jessica, and then I think we do have, I think we're pretty much in the discussion now, but yeah, please go ahead.
I have a point of clarification and then a suggestion to law. this kind of first proposal of being if you're ineligible to serve the full elected term, you aren't allowed to run. You would be, this ineligibility is because of appointment term limits, not because you are on year one of an appointment and would need to reapply, correct?
Right, it's because they're staggered, right?
So even if you would need to reapply in the middle of your elected,
She's not talking about the
No, because
term
we
limit.
already have that,
It's the
don't we?
reappointment.
Yeah. You mean where you're like being
Yeah.
reappointed, but you have the seat?
yes,
That's, I think
That's
that's always,
allowed,
yeah, because that's
correct.
always been the
Okay.
case.
Just wanted to
Yeah,
clarify.
that wouldn't be changed, no.
that wouldn't be changed.
I
So
know
it is
what you
relative to the term.
We don't
Yeah.
actually have a program on reappointments.
Great, and then I will just sort of call out as potential low-hanging fruit, as we're kind of getting stymied. What I had originally is number 3, this 2-term elected officer term limit. There seems to be, it may be wrapped up, I don't know, Sage, you kind of threw a curveball there relative to changing that term. But I think a term limit, 4-year, total term limit is something, however you slice that, maybe a good thing to consider. And we could all agree on whether it's 2-year terms or 1-year terms, to say 4 years is enough. Maybe something that we can agree on.
No, thank you, Jessica.
To answer Jessica's other question.
Yeah, it's eight people. Okay. 8 people will be,
Our term limited in 2027.
okay.
And do we know 2028? Sorry, Andrew.
No, it's fine.
Well, in theory, it would be like 5 people a year, every year.
Probably pretty front loaded.
2028, we
Yeah,
don't have
no.
any, because the ones we had were not reappointed. So it'll be 27 and
And
then
29?
29. And then I need a graphic calculator after that.
Go ahead, Derek, and then I think, let's see if we can get consensus on
Some of
the discussion.
I guess another question is, so something that's unique about committee boards is half the members are appointed every year, but then these terms are even number of length, they're every 2 years. So I'm just thinking like, how does that compute into any of this? I don't know if it does, if it doesn't, but it seems like you're appointed, yeah, it could be 6 months or a year and 6 months. So I'm just curious if anyone's given that some thought, like, because in that way, we're not like city council. They're all done at the same time. And is there something where like the election is held, but the new members don't take office until the appointment part would happen? Right, like is that another way to make it match up, right? Because I've not participated in an election yet. So if the election is November and the new term starts in December,
January 1st.
you could hold that vote before the new members come in like April, right? And then the new term starts in May, when everyone has been reappointed or appointed to the board. Could be another way to not have new members having to vote on this as soon as they join or a couple months into joining, and to match up those terms.
Right, okay, thank you, Derek. Yeah, I was actually actively thinking about that. Okay, Sage, and then I think we really just have to, yeah, go ahead, Sage.
Well, we have to what? Discuss this? Like,
Yeah, I think because we're kind of spitballing, which is not a bad thing, but we could do this for hours, right?
yeah, well, I like what Derek just said. I think it would make sense ideally just for people's terms to start on June 1st. And be 1-year terms. Yeah, just so every community board member has like, kind of the same experience.
Okay, are you adding that, because I know that was like the 6th proposal that we talked about was a 1-year term, so are you also saying that would be something like a June 1st start? Are you adding that to that proposal?
Well, we mentioned that, like, what are we doing right now? And
Right.
sort of to, like, restart the clock and figure out what the implications of whatever we decide are gonna be. And catering our decision to, like, effectuate, like, the result that we want. I think it just makes sense for the term of the board leadership to coincide with the term of one's board service.
Got it.
I think that's the cleanest thing.
Okay, thank you, Sage. Yeah.
I was gonna say, my opinion, I'm for shortening it from 3 terms. My problem with the 1-year term is I don't think it gives enough time to any officer to do much. I also think it's, having elections every year will take a lot of, from the work away that we're doing. You'll have effectively people in power constantly thinking they have to campaign, which then you have leadership worried about that, and then work's not getting done. I've never seen the November elections be a problem. I've been on this board for like 14 years. I hear what Derek, I hear what you're saying. My only pushback on an April and then into May is essentially you may have people voting on elections that then are not even going to be on the board for what their votes were. And then my problem always with like June was that I agree, like someone might get appointed in May and they're voting in June. No, there's never going to be enough time because there are things that new members might have to vote on that are much more important than who's officer, or chair, or whatever, and they might have to vote on that come June. The idea, I think, with November, probably November was just mocked after every other election, but I think at least it gives people a few months to get to know who's running and this and that and familiarize themselves. So that's just my opinion. But I mean, I think all these are good ideas. The problem is I think any solution we come on some of these things isn't going to work for everybody. So that, you know, these are tough decisions. That's all I'll say.
And just very quickly, I have to agree with you. I think there's definitely an incumbency bias too. If you're having someone who's the face, you know, and then people have a few weeks to vote, and I think that may not create, you know, the most balanced election that we want. Yes, Jessica.
I just want to sort of throw a question out there. The Statement of District Needs process is an intensive part of our responsibility, and that has a rigid timeline that doesn't change. I know a lot of that work happens in the fall, and it's a critical period of time for committees to be focusing on that work. Thinking about the potential of shifting, and you know, Angel, this is a kind of a question for you're more familiar with that timeline of how intense it is for the board, general board members, but also committee chairs and executive board members. How has there ever been any friction or issues with the intensity of an election going on while also getting a district needs responsibilities taken care of? No.
No, I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing at how difficult it is to get the members to participate with the district budget. No. It's a good question.
All right, thank you, Jessica. And Nilsa, I see your hand is raised.
Yes, hello. I'm not sure. Can you hear me?
Hear you.
Okay. Well, I think that I'm not quite sure who else is on this call, and my apologies for not being there in person, but I can speak uniquely as being a chair, being the elections chair, being the bylaws vice chair. And I just want to say that as a chair, I understand that other community boards do the 1-year term. I personally found that that wasn't enough because you're trying to build bridges and you're trying to get to know your community board members at the same time that you are learning a new position and reaching out to the electeds. In terms of the November voting, that has never been a problem. This question has only come up because of the term limits and the fact that we have 3 terms and it's not clear that it says that you must complete 3 full terms. And so in terms of the transition of 1 year, I was the one that spoke up, and the way that it was explained in tonight's meeting is not how I meant it. I thought that if there was a 1-year interval, that would allow the board, since the things that the executive committee did not vote on in terms of the changes for the bylaws, to hit a June election, that might be a way to satisfy the third term requirement. I have always been in alignment with 2 terms of 2 years is quite enough. And the fact that elections happen in November allowed new members to come in May and June, get a familiarity of the board, do any meetings in the summertime, come back in September, they're more acclimated in October, and then they would vote in November. And so that has been, I personally don't think there's any problem with the November. And I think that the Bylaws Committee, with all due respect, needs to focus on, if you come up with multiple solutions for one problem, this is never going to get done. And I speak from that point of view because I was Bylaws vice chair twice under 2 chairs and 2 board chairs. If the November works, and I've done elections committee at least 4 times for this board, then that should not be the issue. The issue should be whether from 3 terms to 2 terms, whether the people that run for the position should be able to do the 2 terms with reapplying for the board. And I will tell you that I don't think any Manhattan Borough president is going to remove a sitting person who has a position on the board that's been voted on. So that's just my opinion. Because I'm hearing a lot of things, and it sounds like the bylaws weren't for a complete revision. The bylaws were for certain things that were brought up in executive to address. And then after you address those issues, if you feel that there are more things to address, then I could see that. But a complete revision, whatever that, in my opinion, is not necessary. But I'll let you to do your process. I just wanted to explain me as a sitting chair for 2 terms, choosing not to do a 3rd term. And as one who does elections and has done other things, I just thought I'd give you my point of view. Thank you.
Thank you, Nosa.
Thank you, Nosa, and we appreciate your drawing your experience and wisdom, and that is informative to the committee. I feel like we've kind of really gotten into the weeds here. So what I propose is we can either very quickly vote and just remove some of these, some of maybe the less tenable solutions or the less popular solutions, so we can get to a few, the ones that are probably the sticking point for tonight's meeting. And I, with regrets and apologies to the ones that are not as popular solutions. In terms of a 1-year officer term, if there are any objections to that, then we can take that off the table, but I want to make sure everyone's fully heard. I know, you say you discussed at length. If there's any objection, or if anyone wants to have a debate about that, please let us know now. Otherwise, I think we can take that off the table as an option that we're looking at tonight.
Yeah, I don't.
I'm going to put my timer back on, because I got kind of off track too. Go ahead.
I understand if other people here don't want to do that. I think it's a good idea. I think it just creates like uniformity. Additionally, I think if they're 1-year terms, and the terms begin like when somebody's board term starts, it'll just sync up well. The reason people are giving about the only reason this is a problem now is because of the term limits. Like, yes, it is a problem because of the term limits. Like, that's the problem. It's not going to cease being a problem because this is like the first time we're dealing with it. So anybody who's like, this hasn't been a problem in the past, that's because things have changed. So I don't think that's like a valid argument, though I understand where people are coming from with it. Also with the 1-year term limits, I think, yes, it creates like a little bit of like electoral pressure, but people are just going to get reelected. Like, it's more about like going through the process, and there are other things we can do to make it so that this isn't a distraction, like having the board oversight committee sort of monitor elections so that there's like a standing body to do it. You don't have to like convene a new elections committee every time. Yeah, I don't think it's a problem.
I'll give you like that last thought, just because we're.
Okay, and I don't think it's a
we're trying to
problem
wrap
if
up
people who are about to leave the board vote for who the next chair of the board is. We let old people vote all the time for elections that might go beyond.
And I have to cut you there, but thank you for that, Sage. And I apologize. I don't mean to like comment on the quality of an idea. I'm not saying it's a good or bad idea, right? I think the problem I want to avoid is, as Nelson pointed out, we could be in a situation where we're shooting down a million ideas or considering a million ideas, and we do want to kind of narrow the scope to the extent that we can, so we can reach a solution before the end of today's meeting. But I definitely point taken, and I appreciate you sharing that perspective and those arguments. So, Adem?
I agree completely with Sage saying that term limits have created a lot of these problems, and we have to acknowledge that because term limits are not going anywhere, at least for the foreseeable future. And I'm not disagreeing with any of your solutions. That's a lot of changes to make because of this. There is the flip side, which has been presented. It came from Angel, and I let him speak to it more, but it's kind of already been said. We can keep everything kind of the way it's been, and if you can't serve the 2 years, you cannot run. And then everything else stays the same. And so instead of making a bunch of changes, and essentially, unless you make a bunch of changes, then maybe you can have everybody run all the time. But otherwise, and then we'll be cycled out eventually, and then everybody will be subjected to that same thing at one point or another. I mean, that's just an idea. So I think there's the approach of term limits are here. Should we start changing everything? Or term limits are here. What can we do to change them with minimal changes? And yeah, there will be impacts, but I think there are going to be impacts both ways. I think I'm not saying what my opinion is, but I think that's what I think everyone at this table has to wrestle with, unless I'm totally missing it, but yeah.
No, that's really helpful. And I think, and I'll get to you, Jessica. I think I want to clarify for the members. So I think what we're now debating is, again, either the truncated or shortened election term or the, Adem, how would you describe?
The alternative?
Yeah.
Well,
Like in a quick pithy way, I don't know.
I mean, like, I'm being honest with you, the truncated term thing didn't make sense. I mean, I understand why it was proposed. I don't think that's a solution going forward. I think there are two solutions here. Sage is like, I think and it could be pulled off. I'm not saying that it can't be. It would really be like tearing it down and then rebuilding it, maybe rebuilding it better. I don't know. The other one is, because term limits are a problem, right? So you either take that approach or you say, as Nilsa said, November elections haven't been a problem. There's a reason maybe why November elections don't make sense to some, why it does make sense to others. And essentially you can keep everything the same, except that there is a disqualification that if you can't serve a 2-year term, should you be elected, because you'll be termed that off before you could finish that term as an officer, you cannot run for that seat. And that was, again, he could speak to it better than I can. That idea came from Angel out of Office Oversight to come up with the solution that I think was coined the most elegant solution without having to change a ton of things. That's it.
Thank you, Adem. Jessica?
I appreciate the clarification and the simplification. We'll say when the work of the committee gets reported to the board alongside any potential motion or action or solution, to identify some of these alternative considerations is, I think, really important to do, not to confuse anybody, but to really highlight how many ways, you can slice this, right? How many adjustments could possibly happen, and ultimately what, as a committee, we decided was perhaps the most efficient in doing the work. That being said, that puts it out there, as an idea to the general body that can, continue to sit with it and understand it as we all move through the elections process in November together, and then a couple of years down the road. So I think it's part of the reporting and part of the work to be shared for informational purposes only, in addition to the potential actions that we may be presenting to the board.
I think that's a great idea, and I think we'll make sure to report that. I think I do want to speak briefly on these things. I think, I'll time myself. My concern is that, I think we can term some of these as elegant solutions, some of these as not, but I think they still don't eliminate the problem, right? I think, we could do, an ineligibility clause or amendment, but the fact remains that then when there are people who are almost term limited out, they're suddenly forced with a choice. It's like, I have a few years left. If I don't run this year, I'm like a ghost member on the board that final year, right? And so, right, and so I think the problem is that, like, I don't think any of these solutions will be elegant or clearly solve the problem long term. And my other concern, I mean, again, I think it's very important to not make any decision based on any individual thing, but I think, this year is a good example of there are 8 people who suddenly, won't be able to contribute, should they so choose, in that way to the board. And I think that is a concern that we need to think about. And that's something that will happen in 2027 and in 2030 and so on and so forth. I think I have 30 seconds left. I think this is something that we have to grapple with when we think about what's good for the future of the board, what's good for, people a decade from now, right? I just want us to think long term and have that flexibility moving forward. And I'm done. I just want to make sure, does anyone on the committee have anything additional they'd like to add to this conversation before I move to members of the public? Yeah, please go ahead.
I don't think there's any elected position in the United States that's a year. I think that being like, in Congress, it's 2 years, in city council, it's 2 years, because it's a lot to do. And then even Congress, because I'm not sure how close you guys are with your congressman, but even Charlie Rango, like, it's just even 2 years, it's a very short amount of time. They're constantly running, and they spend maybe 50% of their time trying to re-up and fundraise and 5 birthdays and every house gatherings and all these other things that you get invited to, and as a business owner in the community, like, you participate in, right? I think this, we have to live with the reality of what we're facing. Right now, as we can see, like, we have a very fractured board, right? A board that needs a lot of mending. Like, we have to live within that reality. Whoever comes into play has to take that into consideration to make sure that these things get better put, so that in the future, as new members come in, they don't have to, like, experience those things. I think that the solution that was presented at our oversight that we brought here, which is if you cannot complete, fixes it going forward for everyone. Everyone now knows. You have 8 years. Before this was unheard of, right? People were here 20 years. I think Debbie was here. Debbie was the longest standing community board member. I forget how many years she was here. I think I'm at 15 now myself. But 8 years is a short amount of time. Very short.
And I'll give you like 10 more seconds, but to finish it.
It's a shame that all this knowledge gets pushed out within 8 years. It's crazy.
Thank you, Listener. Anything else from committee members before I move to members of the public? Anyone online? No. Did you see your hand? Yeah, go ahead, Derek.
So I'm against any sort of limitations on who's eligible to run, whether it's because they couldn't finish out the elected term because of appointments, or the proposed idea that you must serve 2 full years, like serve a full appointment term before you can run. I think it just creates a second class group of members, whether they're at the end of their time here or at the beginning. There is a solution to this problem that requires no changes to the bylaws. Don't vote that person in. If you're upset that someone's running, would not be able to finish their term, would force a special election, don't vote for them, right? The solution already exists. Bylaws are supposed to be hard to change, right? You can see the work you're putting in order to do it, the work it takes to present it to the board and to move forward with it. And so, we would be making decisions here that'll impact people not that far in the future, right, who don't have a voice at this table, and may want to have opportunities to participate. And I leave you with, my understanding is in the last election, everyone ran unopposed. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So I think, back to Angel's point about what is the problem we're trying to solve, I think a very good thing to consider is how do we get more involvement and competitiveness in these elections. We know what happens in Congress when people run and don't feel like they have to worry about their jobs. And so it would be no different at this level as well. So I'm against any sort of an eligibility clause, again, whether at the beginning or end of someone's time in.
Right on time. Okay, thank you, Derek. I'm going to give everyone, someone's hand. Please, Nilsa, go ahead.
Hi, I'm one of the board members that's going to be termed out. And I'm quite trying to understand this push about this problem about people terming out. The fact of the matter is that we apply, we may be appointed or we may not. A lot of people have been on the board a long time. The idea of term limits and the idea of allowing different people to vote is so that more voices can become on the executive board. You're not keeping anybody out by saying they can't run if they only can do a year and a half. The fact of the matter is we were appointed to this board so we can do the best we could for this board. It is not about who can run and represent for a year and a half for personal reasons. It is for what is better for the board. That's what we were appointed for. And if 2 terms of 2 years and making sure that whoever puts their name out there can do that, then that's better for our community, right? Because right now we don't have a bench, right? And we haven't cultivated new and exciting ideas on the board. You're not excluding anyone if I decide I can't run for an executive position, because I am a leader on this board, whether I have a title or not. You're not excluding Xavier because he can do 2 years because he's a leader on this board, and the same thing with Jessica.
I'm gonna let you finish that thought and then we'll proceed, but we're listening.
You know what I mean? So I'm just saying I'm finished. I'm not understanding this push about how this is going to impact every year. Every year, someone will not be appointed on the board, but the board has to go on. The executive positions have to go on, and the executive position should go on for the length of time that's put on the bylaws. Changing things to fit people's situations may not be the best thing. And with that, I'm getting off the phone. Thank you.
Thank you, Nosa.
What are we talking about? That's the whole
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah, so what I've heard variously are either a discussion about a truncated or shortened term, an ineligibility clause, again, we'll work out the language more precisely after this meeting, or a 2-term term limit. And so I think it's probably now time to vote on these items. I think we've had enough debate, unless there's anything else from anybody else. I do want everyone to have an opportunity to opine. Members of the public? Okay, so I think we can start with it doesn't really matter, but I guess the 2-term term limit. So that would be 2 terms of 2 years, I believe that's correct. And go ahead, Jessica, something you want to add?
You got a motion?
Yeah, is there a motion to support? Yeah, okay. Do I have a second?
I think it was your vote, right?
I know.
Yeah, okay.
For procedure's sake.
I'll second.
Okay.
Motion is to recommend to the board,
So,
amending
yeah, I'll
the
let you.
bylaws, for a 2-term officer limit.
Okay,
Of 2 years. Well,
2 terms of 2 years.
okay.
okay. Now, Yeah.
2-year term.
The term is 2 years.
it's confusing.
Yeah, so like essentially 4 years maximum, not consecutively or just total.
I second.
Now that it's been stated, do I have a second? I believe I heard say, okay,
Clarification question.
oh my God, I'm gonna kill you, Safe.
Well, no, this is,
I guess this is the process.
I mean,
I'm just
talking about the
joking.
term limits
Yeah.
thing, I think it's 4 terms, or is it 5?
3 2-year terms.
Right now?
I mean, somebody's board service, they can serve.
Oh, now? 4 2-year
Oh.
terms
Okay, and so that is a total of 8 years, and then they have to take a 2-year break.
before they could try to get
So
on.
would this count after they come back? Because anybody who leaves is just gone for like
I
2
mean,
years.
I hear what you're saying.
That's a good point.
Consecutive. We use the term consecutive there, consecutive.
I think you did use the term
2
consecutive.
Yeah.
terms,
Yeah.
2 consecutive 2-year
Yeah.
terms is the limit.
Okay.
Take a break, come back, and you wanna do it all again?
Bless it be your heart. Do this to yourself.
And I think it's only fair to, we have a hand in the. Yeah. Also, I want to say something afterwards too, but go ahead, Asher.
Oh no, I was just raising my hand for the vote.
Oh, okay. I will just say very quickly, and I'll tell myself, I do, and just thinking long-term, I just hope that, I think there can be extremes, right? I think like, I do think a 1-year term doesn't leave a lot of time for an officer to, leave a legacy and move the board in a particular direction. I also think that, maybe 3 years is too much, but I don't know what effect a two-year consecutive term would have if that's too much or too little. I think that's something that maybe the full board will have to talk about too. I think it's something to think about for all of us after this vote. And I'm done with that. Yeah.
Maybe,
Jessica.
say, I think it aligns with the overall, board appointment term limits as far as, what you can imagine as a term. 4 years is still a good long time, so if you, when you get on the board, you can project a little bit, understand your intentions, align with the election cycle, and do what you need to do when you need to do it. And I think that intention, it will hopefully be there from day one when board members, they say, I'm here to take on a leadership position. I know I have limitations, both in term limits and also in the capacity I will be able to serve. So I think that pressure, deadlines motivate, and I think it's, they align well.
I do love a deadline. Okay, thank you, Jessica. Oh yeah, I let a little debate because I know we had a point of clarification. Is there any further debate so we can, I'm gonna ask you to say it again, I'm so sorry, Jessica, but now that we've clarified what the motion is, seeing no further debate, is there a motion?
Yes, motion on the floor is to recommend to the board, a limitation of two consecutive 2-year term limits for elected office.
Well, we want to clarify those consecutive.
Yeah.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, second from Jose. Angel, at long last, can you give us the roll call?
Jose Altamirano. Aye. Adele Brio.
Yes.
Kevin Crouch.
Nay.
Jewel Jones. Sage Mason.
Nay.
Jessica Morris.
Yes.
Valerie Ponte.
Yes.
Asher Rodriguez.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Doing the work, y'all. Congrats. Okay. So we've completed that item. I think that just leaves us with, and I don't know how much appetite we have for debate, but discussion of. So there's one requirement of having served a board term for at least, having served one board term before running. Is that something we want to pick up now or table for later? And then, yes, Jessica, go ahead.
Question, if we propose a motion, and it gets
We can also
voted
just do that,
down,
yeah.
you can propose it and vote against it?
Yes.
Yeah?
Motion?
Yeah.
No, I love this.
I like this. Yeah, get it.
We've talked about this at length, so yeah.
This is good.
So we were at, where were we?
I think you have to be on 2 years before you can run for it.
A motion to recommend to the board, requirement to have served a full 2-year appointment prior to, running for an elected officer position.
I'm gonna second that. Okay, so, and then we have a roll call for this as well?
We're gonna debate this one? Oh, you want, okay.
Well, no, if he wants to debate.
You can
Yeah,
debate
if
it
you
now,
want to.
because I know he doesn't, you go
He
ahead.
can rise
Yeah.
for, rise against.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if terms are going to be two,
I'm gonna tell you.
2 years, then, but I also think this is gonna get.
Wait, what do you,
Oh, I'm
ask
just,
for
I'm wondering if
clarification,
it's
your
necessary for me to speak, or if, like, you said you wanted to.
We're moving it up.
But if you want to speak, you have the right.
Yeah,
to
please.
speak.
I don't wanna stop the debate.
I only want to speak if will.
He has the right to speak. I don't think you need
No, but we could debate everyone, yeah, you could go however you want.
Yeah, but if everyone's already made up their mind.
Maybe you could
No,
No, but you
no.
can say what you
Yeah.
want, yeah, you
No, this is
might
what
change some minds.
I just think, a couple things. One.
No, I'm glad that you're speaking, please.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
One is that with this 2-year thing, it just, if the 2 years is still the length of a term, then that creates like a misalignment of maybe somebody's here for a year, they can't run in like the next election, so they have to wait 2 years for it to happen.
So it's like three
for
then.
3 years,
Yeah,
really.
yeah.
And then, based off of what we just said, they might only have like a 2-year window to run for anything.
I think that's a
I'll make
great
a
point.
friendly amendment then.
Please
to-
go ahead,
to- Can we make it 1 year?
So half a term,
Half a
half
term.
a community board term.
So you can't run coming in immediately. You can't run if there was a special election. You'd have to be on at least a year. And then whatever falls after that falls.
Point of clarification,
Yep,
this is for board members who have not previously served.
Yes.
appointed.
I think that's another great point.
Yeah.
Because if you came back on, you have experience, you don't need to be, so I would say members who have not previously served on this board be on for at least 1 year before being able to run for an elected officer position. That's, I guess, the friendly amendment. I think I agree with what you see, you changed minds. I agree with that, but I think it still leaves a little bit, so we don't have people come in and who have just no experience or anything, which might not really happen, but you never know. Because I was here, Angel, correct me if I'm wrong, didn't we have somebody serve as a treasurer after only being on the board for like a month or two, like way back? Yep, a couple of weeks, and it didn't work out. Not that it would work out anyway, but
Listen, if someone obscenely
Yeah.
famous like Taylor Swift moved to East Harlem.
I'd vote.
ran for
No,
the-
not her.
We want to prevent that. They're very likely.
Jalen Brunson. That's about
I would
Okay.
hope, yeah, get the lay of the land.
Any comments from the board before, or from the committee before I go to the next one? Go ahead, Derek. Yeah.
I just want to reiterate, if someone is not qualified, you don't vote for them. So you don't necessarily have to have a disqualification in the bylaws. You can just not vote for the person with 1 week experience on it.
Point taken, Angel, and then Adam.
I could not disagree more strongly. We have many examples of the board not taking its responsibility, as you laid out, responsibly, and instead voting for a friendly face, many times. So I think that this is where a rule, like in the bylaws, is helpful to offer clear guidelines as to the way that we should be comporting ourselves, and something to judge ourselves against. That is not the only example. We've had several people that have no business within a mile of anything. And like, oh, yeah, that's my buddy from softball, boom. And then the board, suffers. So I take your point, but I disagree.
Thank you, Angel. Adam.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't think about it like he's got much more experience. I'll just say this. I'm not a fan of disqualifying people from things. There are requirements. I know we keep going to like higher offices or whatever, but a 33-year-old can't run for president, right? And we don't say we'll put them on the ballot and then we don't vote for them. And I don't know if I agree with that, but there are thresholds that we have for almost every elected seat. I don't know,
Immigrant.
whatever they are, whether we agree with them or not, there are. And so what we're essentially doing here isn't so different. And it seems to be working, not maybe ideally all the time, but I don't know what the trade-off would be. But, and I second what Angel said. I only thought of one example, but there have been, without getting,
Of course there are.
yeah. But I respect the spirit of what you're saying, and I think not in being sarcastic, like in a bubble would be the best solution, but then there's always these other factors. That's all. Asher's
Thank
got
you,
my
Adam.
hand up.
Asher, and then Jessica, and then. Go ahead, Asher.
Hi, so I was just thinking that, sorry, I'm like losing my voice, so what I was thinking is just because of, once again, term limits, if someone leaves and they come back, like let's say they only left for a year or two, they could still run when they come back. However, if someone's been gone for more than 2 years, like a full term, then they should have to wait the 2 years. If that makes sense. Sorry if that's making it complicated. It's just something I was thinking about.
So is that a friendly amendment, Asher?
Yeah.
And who originated the motion?
Okay, it was Jessica, and then
Yeah,
I
Jessica.
friendly amend, because Sage made a good point, so I think, let me try to get this all right. I friendly amended it down to 1 year you had to be on, and it was only if you were newly appointed, not if you had already served. but I think now this is saying if you've already served, but you haven't been on for 2 years, that would also apply.
I leave that.
It would essentially treat you as a new member.
So,
You can reject or accept, and then we can vote.
so I think the simple friendly amendment that Adem made, changed my vote, which is pretty powerful and excellent, I think, in a procedural adjustment way, from a functional approach. Asher, I understand your intention, because the board evolves in a period of 2 years, can change a fair amount. At the same time, that's, it's a cycle, right? So I don't think, I think someone who checked out for that period of time, but then comes back and wants to run for elected office, the assumption would be that they're still engaged in some way, whether it be in the community or, attending meetings or otherwise. So I don't know that, that additional technicality will help support the intention of what we're trying to, provide some guardrails for in making this amendment.
I still
Thank
think
you.
it should, oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Asher, and then I think I missed someone over here. No, okay, go ahead, Asher.
I still think it should be 2 years. I still think it should be 2 years before someone has any leadership position, because it's been mentioned before, like your first year, you're watching, you're getting to understand, like you're like basically thrown in like deep water, and then your second year is you starting to like build up yourself within the board and building up like how you're serving, if that makes sense. So I don't think 1 year is enough time for someone to have all their stuff together to be able to lead the board. And also I think it makes sense what I was saying, about if someone leaves for 2 years, because so much, like I said before, so much can happen in 2 years with the board. So it's not necessarily me saying people aren't experienced if they leave and come back, but if they've been gone for so long, they don't understand the culture necessarily.
Thank you, Asher. Jessica, do you accept or reject the addition to the second friendly amendment?
I'm sorry, I did not accept I think it's really important to consider, but from a logistical and procedural, I don't think it's necessary.
Thank you, Jessica. I'm sorry, I'm making you do this, but can you restate your motion in full, just so we have it clear for the record, and then, do we have a motion?
Sure, right, so motion to recommend to full board, requiring that any person any board member running for an elected position have served at least 1 full year of an appointed term prior to running for office.
Thank you, Jessica. Do we have a second?
Second.
Valerie? Okay. Angel, maybe do the roll.
Yes. Let's see. Jose?
Aye.
Dem?
Yes.
Kenneth?
Aye.
Joel?
Yes.
Sage?
Aye.
Jessica? Morris? Sorry about that. Valerie?
Yes.
Asher?
No.
No. Okay, motion carries.
Thank you, Angel.
Could I,
Yes, okay.
I'm confused, because my initial thought was for the election was either the truncated or the ineligible, sorry, I'm an immigrant, favoring eligibility.
No,
Things can't just-
Ineligible.
Is there a word that-
Yes.
Ineligibility. It's hard, I can't.
No, I'm glad you brought that up, because I was
No,
going to
and
move to that
so,
next.
because the 2-year term was something that I mentioned, that I've heard Nilsa say, Nilsa being a prior chair, that she thinks that extended time, which is why I put it in there. But that still doesn't solve the problem that we're still facing in regards to whether the choice was this truncated term or which most of us agree doesn't make sense, or the eligibility or ineligibility. Oh, I impressed myself.
No, you got it. You landed the plane. Yeah, I mean, those are the final two items that we have today.
Okay. I just
So,
want to make sure that.
yeah, so thanks for bringing that up. So, briefly, if there's any further debate, I think we've discussed them at length. I'll pick one at random and we can have a vote. Go ahead, Jessica or Sage, whoever.
Motion?
Yeah, I'm looking for a motion.
A motion to recommend to the board a truncated period of office in the year election cycle coming up. Is that what we're asking?
Perfect, yes.
That.
Do I have a second?
I'm sorry, I think you have to define truncated, otherwise people are gonna be confused.
Shortened.
Sure.
Like,
How long?
14
No, how-
I mean,
how
like,
long?
I mean, like, from when to when?
Sure, election with a service period of January 2026 to May 2027. Is that right? April 30th, 2027.
I think that's
If nobody supports it, we can just dispense it and not.
I mean, I think you're just trying to.
You're just-
move it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks a
Yeah,
lot.
let's get it off the table.
Does
Okay,
anybody
yeah.
want that?
No,
all right, folks.
you just trying to, not your fault. You just trying to say the dates it would be, don't be, throw that out.
Yeah, I just don't want like any vote here to be a foregone conclusion, which is, for the same reason that, I want you to opine about your, having a 1-year elected officer term, right? I personally thought, it's not the worst idea, but also respectful of the committee, and we should move forward, given there's no need to like debate that further. Everyone good? Yes?
Yeah,
Okay,
So no motion.
no motion.
yeah, no motion.
Can I make a motion?
Sure, go ahead, Jose.
Make a motion to, well, here's the language, right? Make a motion that anyone running for an elected position has to serve out the full 2-year term in order to run for that position.
Okay.
Wait, we never made it.
No,
We
we
debated
just
it.
talked about
Yeah,
it.
Now we're actually doing.
Now we're actually gonna vote on it.
This is the motion.
Then ad nauseum.
That language okay?
Yeah, I think that's fine, because I have to iron it out anyways. So I think, does that, everyone, does that make sense to everybody?
Yeah.
Do I have a second? Jessica? Okay, I think this is the last item, Angel, so you do them all. Thank you.
That's not sweet, so. Jose,
Yes.
Adam,
Yes.
Kenneth,
Nay.
Jewel,
No.
I'm so
Sage.
sorry. I'm so sorry. My internet cut out. Could the motion be repeated? I'm so sorry. Not to be that
Sure.
person.
No. Yeah, you definitely, you deserve to hear the motion in full. Jose, if you could repeat it again, I guess we'll strike that from the record, that vote.
Sure.
Sorry.
The motion is that anyone running for an elected position needs to be able to serve out the full 2-year term of that position.
Okay. Just for clarity's sake, do I have a second? Okay,
call roll again.
yeah, now everyone's heard the motion? No objection? Okay, go ahead, Angel.
Jose,
Aye.
Adam,
Yes.
Kenneth,
Nay.
Jewel,
No.
Sage,
No.
Jessica,
Yes.
Valerie,
I'll stay, I don't know, I'm confused.
Asher,
No.
Doesn't carry.
the motion does not carry.
Okay, folks, I think by my count, those are the 6 items we want to discuss tonight. So I believe we can move to old business, if any, unless there's anything else.
No, I think we did a lot.
Yeah. No, was any new business?
A question.
Yeah.
In theory, the stuff around the terms and the overlap and all that probably needs to be resolved before the next election.
Yes.
So I'm putting that, I don't, for next month, like what's it gonna look like to get that in? Because it feels like whatever the terms are for the bylaws at that election, that's what we've gotta do. So I guess urgency around trying to address the elections thing. The community boards throughout Manhattan vote all throughout the year. There are ones that vote in November, it starts in December, starts in January, they vote in May, they vote in June. So that may be a thing to do, to look at other community boards and how they time their elections and when their terms start. I think it would be a good idea to see if someone else has the answers to this question.
Thank you, Derek. Any other new business? Okay, I guess we can roll call.
Can we,
Yeah.
I would just say, can we send the minutes after this, like, sooner?
Yeah, it's a bit confusing, yeah.
Just I wanna know, like, what we decided exactly.
By my count,
So
yeah,
the 2-year term.
2-year
For
term.
1 year.
Yeah,
You can't run for a year. But I agree.
we'll get it out in minutes, yeah. And that's, yeah, Adam and I will talk about that. Okay. Maybe do the roll call, Angel?
Jose,
Present.
Madam,
Here.
Kenneth,
Here.
Jewel,
Here.
Sage,
Here.
Jessica, Morris, Valerie,
Present.
Asher.
Here.
Okay, meeting's adjourned.
You're here.